What do you think the whole bag is worth?
I think conservatively, looking conservative.
It's on this cable, see? Right? And there's a button on the side. We're getting a new filament for it. Button on the side, you press it and it gets orange.
Barry Weiss has revealed something shocking, and it is enough to blow everything wide open. Inside Storage Wars, every auction looked like a simple gamble on abandoned units. But beneath the surface, the dynamics between the buyers told a different story. Known for his calm approach and tendency to avoid conflict, Barry Weiss has now pointed to the one person on the set who made his experience far more difficult than it appeared. Who is this figure behind the storage lockers, and what exactly did this person do to stand out so sharply against Barry's reserved personality? Join us as we unravel the most controversial figure Barry Weiss has ever worked with. The man Barry Weiss couldn't ignore. Barry Weiss never treated storage auctions like a battlefield. Inside Storage Wars, he moved with ease and observed more than competing. The room around him often felt lighter when he was present, almost theatrical, as if the stakes didn't weigh on him the way they did on everyone else. Barry Weiss wasn't just another bidder. For many viewers, he became the heart of the show's most memorable moments. He turned auctions into something like unpredictable adventures beyond just transactions. Barry would also show up with his friend Kenny, drive custom cars into auction yards, and treat each locker like a story waiting to unfold. At one point, he spent thousands on a unit simply because he enjoyed the mystery of it. With his slicked-back silver hair, vintage outfits, and an eye for the unusual, he looked and acted like someone who had wandered into the scene for the experience, not the profit. While others calculated margins, Barry followed instinct. He bought what caught his attention, not what guaranteed a return, and that difference defined him. Even when deals didn't work in his favor, Barry rarely reacted. He shrugged it off, smiled, and moved on. However, that balance rarely lasted. It shifted the moment Dave Hester stepped in. Much of Barry's approach stood in direct contrast to Dave Hester's presence. Dave brought pressure and control into every auction. Where Barry observed everything at auctions, Dave acted without hesitation. The difference didn't need confrontation to be felt. Dave was often everywhere, and so it was visible in timing, in pacing, and in how the room responded. Dave's disruption of rhythm, especially with his popular phrase, "Yoop," made it even worse. It made Barry's usual flow less reliable whenever they shared the same space. Even when they weren't bidding against each other, their combined presence changed the environment. Other buyers adjusted, sometimes cautiously, sometimes aggressively, depending on who set the tone first. The room moved between two extremes, and neither fully settled while both were present. What made it more compelling was the absence of open conflict. Barry, known to be gentle and easygoing, didn't argue and didn't compete for dominance as this went on. Yet he never ignored what Dave brought into the space. Over time, that contrast became part of what defined the show's identity. Among viewers, the contrast between Barry Weiss and Dave Hester became a constant point of comparison. It was almost like two different versions of the same game playing out side by side. One of the most talked about exchanges involved an argument over an old sofa, where Dave confidently insisted it was a Victorian piece over 120 years old. Barry challenged the claim, and the disagreement escalated into a $5,000 bet. When the item was later identified as dating from the 1950s rather than the Victorian era, Barry technically won the wager. Nevertheless, some fans admired Dave's discipline and consistency, arguing that he treated the business the way a real auctioneer should. Others leaned toward Barry, seeing him as a reminder that the experience didn't always have to be about squeezing profit from every unit. Barry never really liked it, as it often felt awkward for him since he was someone known for staying in his own lane and avoiding unnecessary tension. Dave wasn't just another bidder in Barry's world. He was the one presence Barry could never ignore. Why did every auction suddenly feel different the moment bidding began, and Dave was around? The auction tactics that made everyone uncomfortable. What began as an on-camera competition inside storage auctions gradually settled into something harder to separate from reality. Inside the world of storage wars, bidding wasn't just about value, but more about control in the bidding process. Few understood that better than Dave Hester. His approach to auctions was often unsettling to everyone around him. Inside storage wars, Dave Hester didn't just compete for units with Barry. He also influenced how other buyers behaved the moment bidding began. What set him apart wasn't just how he bid, but how his presence affected people. Many buyers walked into auctions hoping to read the room, ease into bids, and make calculated decisions. But Dave disrupted that process. His early, forceful bids often pushed others into uncomfortable territory, forcing quick decisions where hesitation would normally exist. For some, that pressure felt less like competition and more like being cornered. His interactions with other cast members reflected that same intensity. Tension with buyers like Daryl Sheets was not uncommon, especially when bids escalated quickly. Exchanges could turn sharp without much buildup, with frustration spilling over in brief but noticeable moments. With Brandy Passante and Jared Schultz, the dynamic often carried a similar edge. This time, it was less about direct confrontation and more about visible irritation when bidding patterns were disrupted. Part of what made these interactions stand out was their consistency. Dave rarely softened his approach, depending on who he was up against. Whether it was a seasoned buyer or someone trying to stay within a tight budget, the pressure remained the same. That lack of adjustment made his style feel rigid to some and calculated to others. There were also moments where his decisions seemed designed to test limits rather than simply win a locker. By driving prices higher than expected, he forced others to either overcommit or step away entirely. For buyers operating on thin margins, that created frustration. Losing a unit was one thing, but being pushed out of it in a way that felt intentional was another. Even outside direct bidding, his presence shaped interactions. Conversations around auctions were often shorter and more guarded, especially when he was involved. There was less openness and less casual exchange. People watched him closely, not just for what he might bid on, but for how he might disrupt the flow again. It was quite a terrible situation. What made the situation more complex was that his strategy worked. He secured valuable units, controlled pacing, and maintained a level of influence that few others could match. But that effectiveness came with a cost. It created distance between him and others in the room, turning routine competition into something that occasionally felt personal. Over time, this pattern defined his relationship with the rest of the cast. It wasn't built on open disputes or constant arguments, but on repeated moments of tension that never fully reset. Everyone understood how he operated. The challenge wasn't recognizing it, but the fact that they had to deal with it again and again, without letting it affect how they played the game themselves. If pressure at the auction was already intense with Dave's behavior, what other troubles did he cause that made him even more hated by Barry? The lawsuit that shook the series network. By the time tensions inside storage wars had become part of its public identity, the most disruptive shift did not happen on the auction floor. It happened in court. The conflict centered on Dave Hester, again, and his legal dispute with A&E Network, along with the production company behind the series. The case began after Dave's removal from the show ahead of a new season. His claim was not just about being cut from the cast, but about the environment in which the show operated. He alleged that elements of the series were not entirely organic, and that certain production practices influenced what audiences believed they were watching. Among the most discussed accusations was the claim that items were strategically placed in storage units to heighten drama and guarantee engaging television moments. Those allegations struck at the core identity of the series. Storage Wars had built its reputation on unpredictability, the idea that value was hidden, not manufactured. Dave's claims suggested that at least part of that unpredictability might have been shaped in advance. However, the network strongly denied these accusations, maintaining that the show reflected real auctions and genuine outcomes. The legal filing also included claims tied to his exit from the series, arguing that raising concerns internally contributed to his removal. This introduced another layer to the dispute, shifting it from a disagreement about production authenticity into questions about workplace retaliation and control over creative direction. The case quickly drew attention because it involved both the credibility of a hit television format and the treatment of one of its central personalities. As the matter progressed, portions of the case were dismissed by the court, narrowing the scope of what would be considered. Even so, the dispute itself continued to generate discussion because it brought rare visibility to how reality television is structured behind the scenes. Most viewers see final edits, not production decisions, and the lawsuit briefly opened a window into that gap. The network maintained its position throughout. They emphasized that reality television often relies on storytelling techniques such as selective editing and narrative construction without altering the fundamental reality of the events being filmed. Dave's side, however, continued to argue that the level of production involvement went beyond standard practice. Eventually, the dispute did not end in a public trial verdict, but in a confidential settlement. The terms were not disclosed, and neither side provided a detailed public resolution of the claims. What remained was the impact of the dispute itself. Dave returned to the series in later seasons, but the tone surrounding his presence had changed. The controversy had already left a mark on how viewers interpreted both him and the show. The effect extended beyond one individual. The lawsuit intensified public curiosity about how Storage Wars was produced and how much of what appeared spontaneous was shaped through production choices. What remained after the legal battle was not resolution in the narrative sense, but a shift in perception. The auctions continued, and the personalities remained visible, but the certainty that everything unfolded exactly as seen on screen never fully returned to the same level again. Is Storage Wars also fake? How much of what we accepted as real was actually shaped after the moment it happened, and what was left out completely? Let's find out. Moments that stayed off-screen. What viewers saw on Storage Wars was only a fraction of what actually happened at each auction. A typical filming day involved multiple storage facilities, dozens of units, and long stretches where nothing remarkable occurred. Most of that never made it into an episode. In reality, auctions are uneven. Some units contain nothing but old furniture, damaged boxes, or items with little resale value. Those lockers still get opened, bid on, and cleared out, but they rarely appear on screen. Instead, episodes focus on the few units that produce reactions or tension. The result is a version of events where almost every featured locker feels significant, even though many were not. The process of filming also changes how time is experienced. What appears to be a fast-paced sequence of auctions is often the result of hours of footage compressed into minutes. Bidders wait, move between locations, and spend time inspecting units that never make it into the final story. Those gaps where decisions are slower and outcomes less dramatic are edited out entirely. There are also moments of interaction that never reach the audience. Conversations between cast members, brief disagreements, or even neutral exchanges often happen away from the camera's primary focus. Not every reaction is captured, and not every exchange fits into the narrative structure of an episode. For bidders like Barry Weiss, much of his actual experience at auctions extended beyond what viewers saw. His interest in unusual or collectible items meant he often spent time examining details that didn't translate into quick, visual moments. Those slower, more deliberate observations were rarely included, unless they led directly to a notable purchase or reaction. At the same time, dominant figures such as Dave Hester influenced far more than just the bids that made it to air. His presence affected how others approached entire auction days, something that can't be fully captured in isolated scenes. Another layer that stayed off-screen was the routine nature of the work after the auctions ended. Winning a unit is only the beginning. Sorting through items, transporting goods, and determining resale value takes time and effort. While episodes highlight the most interesting finds, the majority of that process happens without cameras or is summarized briefly. Even the order of events can differ from how it appears. Scenes are often arranged to maintain pacing and clarity, which means auctions from different times or locations may be presented in a sequence that feels continuous. This doesn't change what happened, but it changes how it is experienced by the viewer. Although there were many claims that some of the scenes are fake, none of these means the auctions themselves did not actually happen. The bidding, the risk, and the outcomes are grounded in actual events. What changes is the proportion of what is shown. The ordinary is reduced, the notable is expanded, and the entire day is reshaped into a story that fits within a limited runtime. What stayed off-screen was not a different reality, but a larger one. The version viewers saw was real, but it was selective and carefully assembled from hours of moments that never made it past the edit. When the cameras stopped rolling, what part of Barry's world kept moving exactly the same, without Dave frustrating him and without the show in it at all? The side of Barry Weiss no one saw. Outside the auctions of Storage Wars, Barry Weiss lived a life that was far less public than his on-screen persona suggested. While viewers knew him as the eccentric collector who turned storage units into adventures, his real story extended beyond bidding wars and television moments. Before television fame, Barry was already financially established. He built wealth through the produce distribution business he ran with his family, long before reality TV entered the picture. That background is important because it explains why he never relied on auctions for income as others did. It also made him much more relaxed, despite the tense situations he encountered. For him, storage auctions were never about survival, but just a way to show up. What is less discussed is how quickly his life shifted after stepping into the public spotlight. The show's visibility brought a level of attention that extended far beyond filming schedules. Fans recognized him in public spaces, and his name became tied to a version of himself that was larger than the private individual behind it. However, Barry experienced a very different reality after his serious motorcycle accident in 2019. He suffered multiple injuries, including significant trauma to his chest, back, and legs, requiring surgery and a long recovery period. The incident temporarily removed him from public appearances and showed the energetic figure they saw on television was also living with the physical risks of an active lifestyle outside the show. During recovery, he remained largely out of the public eye. There were no dramatic statements or public updates beyond general acknowledgement of healing. It was a quieter chapter in his life, one that contrasted sharply with the high-energy environment audiences associated with him. Another lesser-known aspect of Barry's life is that his return to television in later seasons of Storage Wars was not continuous or driven by rivalry or storyline pressure. His appearances were selective and often framed more as guest involvement than a permanent return. He treated participation as optional rather than essential, which further set him apart from the show's core competitive structure, especially as portrayed with Dave Hester. Although the show placed Barry and Dave in the same competitive environment, but outside of filming, neither side went on about interactions or personal communications. What exists between them is more absence than documented conflict or resolution. Barry's life away from cameras also reflects a broader pattern. He never fully shifted his identity into television permanence. Unlike personalities who built long-term brands around the show, he treated it as one chapter within a much larger personal timeline. Despite all the noise surrounding the tension often linked to Barry and Dave, he never allowed any of it to define how he lived or operated outside the screen. Whatever friction existed within the auction environment stayed there, contained within the competitive space of bidding, cameras, and production schedules. Away from it, he continued living on his own terms and maintaining the same independence that had always separated him from the show's more intensity-driven personalities. Even after his later return to the series, he did not step back into the dynamic as someone carrying unresolved conflict or personal rivalry. Instead, he treated his appearances as a temporary return to an environment he already understood, moving in and out without attaching personal weight to the narratives built around others. The contrast with Dave remained part of the show's history, not his personal direction. And over time, it became clear that Barry had chosen to continue instead without being shaped by the feud. Do you think Dave Hester's intensity was simply strategy? Or was he deliberately trying to get under Barry's skin? Will Barry Weiss and Dave Hester ever truly settle their differences? Or was the divide too deep from the start? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.